Hey, welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to set up the children blueprint classes. And then we're also going to set up the blueprint structures, the PDAs, and then we're also going to add some code to the parent vehicle blueprint that we're going to use when we get started on the main menu level. So with that, let's get started. So I'm using a different car for this video, different from the import export, because this is one of the cars that's going to be part of the tutorial series. So I might as well show it with this one. This is how the car looks like when we export it initially. And then what we're going to need for the display mesh, which is going to be used in the dealership, is we need the car in its default state. So we need the car as one whole mesh, so to speak. To do that, we're going to be back in Blender, and then we're just going to take the wheels, and then we're going to put them back where they were initially. So for that, we're going to select the empty, Shift S, cursor to selected. I'm going to take the rear wheel, then we're going to Shift S again, and then selection to cursor. And then we're going to do it on the other side as well. So Shift S, cursor to selected, take the wheel, Shift D, escape, Shift S, selection to cursor. And then we're just going to rotate it on the Z 180 degrees. And then we're going to do the front wheel as well. So select the empty in front, Shift S, cursor to selected, select the wheel, Shift S, selection to cursor. The other empty, Shift S, cursor selected, select the wheel, Shift D, escape, Shift S, selection to cursor, and then rotate Z 180. So now we have that. We can also delete the empties because we don't need the location for the sockets. Just delete those. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check if the wheels are properly fitted to the body. So we're going to go press 7, and then we're going to Shift Z to go into wireframe. And then this is what I mean. So as you can see, this wheel's fitment is a little bit like that, and then on the other side it is a little bit further out. So we're just going to correct that real quick. So just select everything on this side, and then we're going to move it, I think it's on the y-axis, and then just set it up like that. We're going to do the same for the other one. So select the wheel, then the caliper, I'm going to then select Y, and then just move it up a bit. I think it should be somewhere there. Okay, that's fine. So now we have the car setup, and now what we're going to do is we're going to select A to select everything, and then we're going to go File, Export, FBX. And for me, it's in here. This is the other way. Just Unreal, selected objects, and then we're going to set this as display underscore mesh. And then armature, don't do that. And then that's it. And then you should do this for every single card that you're going to have in the game as well. So we're going to export that one. And then I'm just going to save this file. And then now we're going to have over to Unreal Engine. So now we're here in Unreal Engine. Just going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this display mesh. Then we're going to open it and then import. I'm going to import the display mesh. So it's going to import it. And then when the import window comes up, we're going to do the same thing. The force all mesh as type. I'm going to set this to skeletal mesh. And then we're going to import. And now everything has been imported, we can just delete the physical asset because we don't need that. And then now I'm going to go into the main folder. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set up the car so that it becomes a parent, not a parent, so it becomes a child blueprint of the parent that we set up previously. So to do that, first what we're going to do is we're going to head over to where the parent is, and then we're going to take the wheel blueprints. I'm going to select these ones, Control C, head back into the folder. And the car is Control V. I have cars already imported. The import process is exactly the same as in the other videos. I will leave a link to those in the description. Now we have the blueprints. So now we need the blueprint for the child. So what we're going to do is in the folder, gonna right click, head over to blueprint, and then here we're going to look for the parent blueprint class. So I called my BP underscore tutorial. So we're going to select that and then select it, and then we're going to rename this to BP VGT. And then as you're going to see, if you open the blueprint, it's going to have the vehicle mesh of your parent blueprint. The thing to this is you can't actually remove any components from this blueprint. So you cannot add or remove anything in the components folder. Everything comes from the parent. So if you want to add anything, you have to add it to the parent blueprint, and then it will trickle down into any and all of the children blueprints based on that blueprint there. But you can make changes to it though. So in the vehicle movement component, in here you can change all the settings. So you can still set up each card to its own unique characteristics. You can do all this. You can change everything in here. Same for the wheels as well, but we're not going to add any wheels to this because we need them to be empty. You might want to add the wheel mesh just so you can set up the wheel blueprints to be unique to each car, so that you have the measurements for the wheel diameter and stuff like that. So when you import the car, say for example, if you want the measurements of the wheel and you bring it in here during the setup process, and you have the wheels and you can check up all the measurements for the tires and stuff like that. So then you're going to need that. But then after you're done setting up the car, you are going to want to remove the wheels again from the blueprint, so that when you do run the code, there's nothing there. It's a completely empty blank canvas, and then you can set up the wheels as you want. So now that we are done with that, we're just gonna go and I'm gonna go and set up the car real quick, and then I'll come back once I'm done with that. So while setting up the animation blueprint, I thought I would show you this part right here, just maybe to save you a little bit of time. So if you're doing like the animation blueprint, like what I'm doing right now, is you can go to your parent vehicle animation blueprint, open that up, and then you can just copy everything in here. Just select everything except for the output pose, and then just Control C, head over to your new car's animation blueprint. Don't forget to go to the class settings and then change the parent class from animation instance to vehicle animations instance, and then in here just paste the code you copied over from the parent animation blueprint, and then you can just connect everything up, and then that should work everything. But for me in particular, I made a mistake when I was importing the parent vehicle blueprint, so I have to make a couple changes. So here by the apply percentage of rotation, I need to change this from the large brake caliper to the FL caliper, and then do the same for the other one. So if all your cars have the same naming convention for all the parts, all the bones are named exactly the same, and all the calipers have the bone prefix, so like in this case it's FL, FR, RL, and RR, and then underscore caliper for that particular bone, then you can just copy everything over, and then you can just compile and save. But if there isn't a standard naming convention between all your cars, then you're gonna have to come and make these changes like what I'm doing right now. So hopefully all your cars have the same naming convention across the board, so that you can just copy everything from your parent vehicle and then just paste it in any other animation blueprint, and then compile and move on. It will save you a lot of time. So I just wanted to let you all know about that, and I'm going to come back once I'm done with this. Now that I'm done with the car, we can move on to the next step. So the next one is we're going to create the PDA. So in the same folder where the vehicle is, right click, then we're going to head over to miscellaneous, then we're going to look for a data asset, and then the one we're going to look for is the PDA vehicles. So like that, and then this one's going to be DA underscore VGT. Then we're going to open that up, and then we're going to fill in all the information. So the max torque, engine, max engine range, all this information. Okay, now I'm done filling in all the information for the data asset, the max torque, engine. So the engine is what type of engine it is. So this one is a 7-liter dual turbo, and then the max torque range is at 4400. The price for now, I'm just setting it to 20 for the sake of this tutorial. The curb weight is 1,244 kilograms. Transmission 6-speed manual. Vehicle name VGT. Drivetrain mid-engine rear-wheel drive, and then the top speed is 458 kilometers. We're going to save that information, close that, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some code to the parent vehicle, which we're going to use in the main menu for the configuration. So first, down here, we're going to add a new custom event. So right click, custom event, we're going to call this configuration, and then along with this, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new function, and this function is going to be one that's going to set the wheels. So by the functions, add set wheels. So by the set wheels, we are first going to, on the event begin play, actually we can do it over here also. Let's just add a variable real quick. I'm going to add a variable first. I'm going to call this one vehicle ID. This one is going to be of type integer, and I'm doing it like this because the vehicle ID is going to be used in several places throughout the blueprint. So instead of constantly having to fetch the information from the save game, we can fetch it once, set this variable to the same value as the save game variable, and then you can use that one instead throughout the rest of the blueprint. So for that, we're also going to create a new function. So creating a function, we're going to call this one load vehicle ID, and then in the load vehicle ID, we're going to drag off and then does save game exist, and then the save game name that I'm going to use is, I'm just going to call it vehicle ID, and then from the return value, drag off and look for a branch, and then from the branch true, drag off and then load game from slot, and then I'm just going to copy over the slot name, Control C, Control V, and then from the return value by the load game from slot, gonna drag off and then cause to BP save game, and then from the BP save game we are going to drag off from the as BP save game and then get vehicle ID. When we got the vehicle ID, we're gonna take the variable, just drag it in, drop it on the pin, and then it's gonna automatically select the set option and then connect that, and then that is it for the load vehicle ID function. I'm gonna compile, head over to the event graph, and then after the as chaos wheel vehicle movement component, we're just gonna drag in the load vehicle ID function and then connect that here. So now we're done with that, we can move on to the load vehicle ID. Now not the load vehicle ID, the set wheels function. Before we do that, in case I forget, by the configuration, we're also gonna just set this function, just in case later on I forget. It does happen occasionally on the event begin play. So we're just gonna move this out the way real quick, and then in here, what we're gonna do is just move this up out the way of everything else. Actually, I should move this up because we don't need that. Under the event begin play, right click, and then look for get game instance. I'm gonna get the game instance, and then from the return value, drag off and then cost to BPGI game, the game instance, connect that, and then from the as BPGI game, drag off, promote to variable, and then connect that to the rest of the code. And we do this because the blueprint structure exists within the game instance, and we do need the blueprint structure for setting the wheels, because we need to set the wheels dependent on which car is currently selected. So now we have that. Now we can go into the set wheels, just compile. So under the set wheels, we're gonna get as BPGI, and then from there we're gonna drag off and then it's gonna say get garage cars. We don't want the main blueprint structure, we want only the cars that the player owns, which is the garage cars blueprint structure. And then from here we're gonna drag off, we're gonna get reference, and then for this value here we're gonna take the vehicle ID and then plug it in there, and then from the get we're gonna drag off and then we're gonna break it. So then what we want from here is two things. Number one is the vehicle, the wheel save, because this is going to be unique to every car, and then the BPS wheels blueprint structure, the two at the bottom. So here in the pins, actually I'm not going to do that because it's easier to take everything off once you actually have everything dragged out. So from the wheel save, we're going to drag off, and then we're going to look for does save game exist. We're going to drag that and plug that in here, and then from the BPS wheels we're going to drag off and do the same we did with the BPS garage cars, and then get a copy. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to select the node for the break BPS vehicles, and then we're going to go all the way down to the bottom and then just hide unconnected pins. So now we're going to hide all that, so now only we see what we actually using. So we're going to move this back, and then we're going to do the same thing like what we did with the load vehicle ID. From the return value that it does save game exist, drag off, look for branch, and then from the true we're gonna load game from slot, and the slot will be the wheel save, so just drag that in there as well. And I'm just gonna add a redirect, make it look nice and tidy. Then we're gonna cost to the BP save game, and then from the BP save game we're gonna drag off and then get wheel ID, and then we're gonna use that and then plug it into the get, drag the get over, and then from the get we are going to once again break, and then what we want is the front and rear wheels only, but we also need to create another function. We're going to call this function set front and rear wheels, and then on this function we're going to select the node, head down to the details, and then by the inputs we're going to have two inputs. The first input is going to be the front wheels, which is going to be of type skeletal mesh object reference, and then the second one is going to be rear wheels, also of type skeletal mesh object reference. And I'm going to compile, and then when I head back to the set wheels, and then we're going to drag in this new function we just created. And then we're going to take the front wheels, connect that to the front wheels, the rear wheels, connect that to the rear wheels, and then connect that to the cars to PP save game. And then that's going to be it for this function. Like that, we don't need it. So now I'm going to move on to the set front and rear wheels, open up the function, and then in here, what we're going to do is we are going to drag in all of these skeletal mesh components so that we can set them at runtime. So we're going to drag in the front wheels first. So either one is fine, whether you're going to go with the FL or the FR first. Just drag those in. We're going to drag off and look for the set skeletal mesh asset. It's not the function, it's the one under variables, mesh, skeletal mesh, the one at the bottom over here. You need to make sure that it is this one. Sometimes the other one doesn't quite work right, but this one is a surefire, so that's the one we want. We want the one that's going to work consistently, and we're going to connect the execution pin, and then from the front wheels we're going to connect that to the skeletal mesh asset, and then we're just going to do the same for the other ones as well. So just take the set skeletal mesh asset, Control D, connect the FR wheel, and then connect the front wheel that comes from the node, and then we're going to do the same for the rear wheels as well. So we're just going to copy these, Control D, set those over there, take the rear wheel components and then connect them to the target, and then from the function node take the rear wheels and then connect it up to the set skeletal mesh assets and then connect those. Okay, now that I'm done tidying up the code, this is what it's supposed to look like. From the function, we drag out all of these, connect them to the set skeletal mesh assets, and then that's going to be it. I'm going to save, head back to the event graph, just make sure that the function is connected. Okay, it is connected, and then lastly we are going to fill in the information for the blueprint structures that we're gonna be using for the cars. So in the BPGI game, we're also gonna set up the functionality for the load blueprint structure in the load garage cars. We're also gonna need these. So in here, we're gonna do the load garage cars first. I'm gonna drag off, and then does save game exist. The one I'm going to use is, you can use whatever you want. I'm going to call this one owned cars, and then from the return value, drag off and then for a branch, and then from the branch true, we are then going to load game from slot, and then the slot we're looking for is the owned cars. But then also for the false, we also do want to load something for the false. We don't just want to load when it's true, because these are the cars. So if it's true, we want to load in the updated version. So from the false, we're going to drag off and then look for create save game object. And then the save game object is going to be the BP save game. And then what we want to do from here is we are going to take the variable we created, the BP save game variable. I'm going to drag that and then drop it over the return value. And then from the set BP save game, I'm going to drag off and then set BPS garage cars, and we want to set the BPS garage cars to be the BPS garage cars in the game instance. So we're setting it to whatever currently exists within the BPS garage on our initial playthrough, but then as the player progresses through the game, we are then going to set it to whatever alterations has been made by the player. So on the true load game from slot, we are going to drag off the return value and then cost to BP save game, and then from the BP save game we're going to drag off and then get BPS garage cars, and then now we're going to set the one in the game instance to the one from the save game. So we're just going to drag this in and then drop it on there, and it's going to set it, and then that makes sure that with the first playthrough we're going to create a new object, but then as the player progresses it will always be updated according to what has been saved in the allocated save slot. So we're going to compile, and then we're going to go through the main blueprint structure. It's pretty much the same code. We're going to drag off, and then we're going to look for does save game exist. Or if you don't want to do it again, you can just copy the code from here. Copy this, copy, and then paste. And then all we're going to do is we're going to change the slot name. So I'm going to call this one strut. Then change it over here as well to strut. And then the values you want is not these ones. You want to change these out to the main structure. So from the false, create save game object, and then the set, we're going to drag off and then set BPS vehicles on the initial start, and then on the top one, that's where we want to get BPS vehicles from the save game, and then set the one in the game instance then to the save game, and not the other way around. Okay, it's fine. I'm gonna compile and save. And then now we're gonna fill in the information for the BPS vehicles. So as you can see, you would increase all of these by the amount of cars that you have. Everything comes in here. So if you select the add, you'll see that you have all the variables that you need to fill in for every car that we set up in the blueprint structure. So all this information will be used each car that is available to the player. So I'm gonna set up the car that we imported in this video, which is the VGS. So here by the data asset, the one I'm looking for, which is the only one I currently have, is the VGT. The body color, I think I'll go with white. I'm gonna go with white. And then the gloss level, this is the shininess of the car. So it's it will be somewhere between 0 and 1. It is gloss, satin, matte, flat, so those types of things. That is the gloss level. 0 is the shiniest, and then 1 would be completely flat. You can set yours to whatever you want. I'm gonna leave mine at 0. So the tone would be the saturation, so it would be like a light version of itself or a dark version of itself. The shade is then the luminosity, so it's where you see the color versus will the color just be black. And then the torque value would be the car's max torque, or the starting off max torque of the car. So for this car, if I remember, it is, I think it's 1544. The front brakes, I'm going to start off with a value of 375, and then the rear brakes I'll start off at 750. The front tires at a value of 3, rear tires 3.5. So they're just the values that you add in your vehicle wheel blueprint class. So all those the vehicles, the values at the bottom. So this over here, the tires would be the friction force multiplier. This would be the tires. The brakes is the value over here, which is the max brake torque. And then you have the max handbrake torque. We're not going to do the handbrake, we just want the max brake. I'm setting it as 375 and 750 simply because I wanted to start out there so that we can compare this when we do the upgrade system for later on in the tutorial series. 375 really isn't much. I think this is the same amount as a standard passenger car. For a car like this, if you want to use the actual brake, that would be something more in the range of like 3000 Newton meters. That's more so carbon ceramic brakes that would be used to actually be able to stop this car with a torque of 1544. But for the sake of the tutorial series and making sure that the upgrade system works, I'm going to start off with the passenger car values, and then I'll work up to then what it's supposed to be. And then for the tires, we're also going to start here so we can have a comparison between low tires and then higher grade tires. And then the powers, we're going to leave these as, because these are going to set during runtime. These correspond to the upgrade mechanics, so it will only be true when we have purchased power stage 1, and then any other times will be false. And then the current RPM, this will also be set during runtime. This is connected to the automatic manual transmission system that I will set up later on, because we do need to get the current RPM range for the car, not the current RPM range, but the current RPM that the car is going at as it's driving, so that we know when to change up and when to change down. So this one will be set at runtime. It will be used on the Aventic, so it's always updated every frame. The idle RPM, we can set this one. I set this to 1000. The max RPM, these are all values that you get in the blueprint. So all the values that we set up in the details in the vehicle movement component, some of the details in here, we are going to be changing them. These are going to be for the upgrade. So the values over here, so you have max, okay, that I haven't set this car up. It's still using the torque value from the parent class. So you can see we have the max RPM here. So every car will be different. So that's why we need to specify it in the blueprint structure, because each car is going to be different. So we need to account for that. And in the blueprint structure, that's what we're going to do that. So all these values in here, you can set them up in the details panel over here for the sake of testing, just to kind of see does your car behave like it's supposed to. And then we're going to go and in the game instance, we're going to set the starting values of the car. This car has a max RPM of 9000. The shift up RPM is where the red line is. This car's red line sits at 7200. The shift down RPM, there isn't really a set shift down RPM for the cars. Usually do is I take the max RPM and then I get about 30% of that. This is for the automatic transmission, of course, so that it doesn't interfere, because some cars, based on the gear ratios, they drop quite a few RPMs from their change. So you want to make it a reasonable place so that so there's no interference between, say for example, the car changes up, but then the RPM drops so much that it ends up triggering the shift down RPM. So that's what I'm saying, something like 30% of the max RPM would be fine. So for this car, that would be 9.8, I think it's 2700. I think that's about 30%, I'm not sure. And then the purchased, this is also a boolean that we're going to change at runtime. This is in the dealership. When the player purchases a car, then it will be set to true. But then when the player doesn't own the car, then it's going to be set to false, so the player can purchase it. And then the front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, all wheel drive, this is for the smoke, but we also set it so that the code knows where to spawn the smoke. This car is a rear wheel drive car, so we're going to set that to true for the rear wheel drive. As we saw in the PDA, it's a 6-speed manual, so it has a max forward speed of 6. And then the display mesh, we did import that, so we're going to look for the display mesh. So the display mesh that we're going to use in the dealership. And then the pawn is the blueprint, the BP VGT. And then the wheel save, we're going to call this VGT wheels. So this one's going to be unique to every car that's in the blueprint structure, so that the save game has a different value for each car, because we don't want it to be like, okay, we're using vehicle number 5, but then we switch over to vehicle number 1 or vehicle number 23, but then every time we select the car, it comes in with the first wheel in its collection. So we don't want that. That's why we have the wheel save. That way every wheel save slot name is unique to that car, and then the wheel ID value will be unique to that car as well. And then in the BPS wheels, I think this car has 2 sets of wheels that I imported with it. And then we have the wheel color. I'm not really a fan of murdered out, so I'm choosing like a gray. And then the name is gonna be the display name, if you choose to go with the display name. And then in the image, you'll then add an image of the wheels. I haven't yet rendered out an image for the wheels, so I'm just gonna go with the wheel name. Actually, I'll do this later, but the wheel name, the image, and then here by the front and rear wheels, you can select the front and rear wheels. For this one, if I'm not mistaken, the first jet should be these pair, and then the rear. So now we have that, and then the gloss level will be the same as for the car. Same principle applies. Will it be glossy? Will it be satin? Will it be chrome? Will it be flat, or will it be matte? I think those are 5 levels of glossiness. And then that's it for the wheels. I'll just do the other pair of wheels, and then that should be everything for the blueprint structure. Onto how to add the information to it. We're not gonna do the garage cars. This one remains empty because the BPS vehicles will be used to fill in the garage cars. So this one remains empty. We'll just fill that up as we purchase the car. So as you purchase a car, that specific car will then be transferred over to the garage cars blueprint structure, and then that information will then be available. So we don't need to fill in anything there. It's only in the main blueprint structure. So I've done 1 car, but I'm going to have 3 cars in this tutorial series, which means I still need to fill in 2 more. I'll do those off screen. You need to fill in all the cars, however many cars you want available to the player. And that's it for this video, right? Yeah, that's it for this video. That brings us to the end. And then in the next video, we are going to get started on the main menu level. So until the next video.